A woman who is truly drawn to an older man rarely says it directly. Instead, she asks two quiet questions that reveal everything about you. Most men never notice when this moment happens. They think the conversation is casual, harmless, maybe even random. But from a psychological perspective, something far more important is unfolding. You see, when a woman begins feeling curiosity about a man who is older than her mind does something very specific. It starts looking for emotional proof. Not proof of wealth, not proof of charm, but proof of character. Mature attraction works differently from the attraction most men experienced when they were younger. At that stage in life, excitement often comes from novelty, spontaneity, and physical energy. But as people grow older and relationships become more meaningful, the brain starts searching for something deeper. Stability. A woman who is curious about an older man is not just wondering if he is interesting, she is wondering if he is grounded. And the first way she quietly tests that is through a question that seems incredibly simple. She might look at you and ask, "So what keeps you busy these days?" On the surface, this question sounds ordinary, almost polite. Many men answer it casually without thinking twice. But psychologically, she is studying your answer very carefully. She is not only listening to the words you choose, she is observing the way you talk about your life, your tone, your energy, your sense of purpose. Because this question is not really about your schedule, it is about direction. Women who are drawn to older men are often attracted to the idea of emotional maturity. They want to know that the man they are speaking with has built a life he respects, that he wakes up with intention rather than drifting through the days. When a man answers this question with bitterness, regret, or frustration about his past, it sends a subtle signal that he may still be emotionally trapped there. But when a man answers with calm pride about the life he has built, even if that life is simple, something powerful happens in the female mind. She sees stability, not perfection, stability. Maybe you talk about your work. Maybe you mention a project you enjoy, a hobby you care about, or the discipline you've developed over the years. What matters is the quiet message behind your words. This is a man who has direction, and direction is incredibly attractive. Because a woman who considers an older partner is often imagining what life might feel like beside him. Would it feel chaotic or grounded? Your answer begins painting that picture for her. But the real test isn't just what you say, it's how comfortable you are saying it. A man who speaks calmly about his life without exaggerating or apologizing for it communicates something deeper than confidence. He communicates self-respect. And self-respect is one of the strongest signals a woman can feel when she is evaluating an older man, because she knows something most men forget. Life has already tested you. If you have reached this stage still standing with dignity, still curious about life, still building something meaningful, that alone is impressive. But there is another question women ask that reveals even more about a man's emotional depth. A question that sounds innocent, yet quietly exposes whether a man carries wisdom from his years, or only the weight of them. And how you answer it often determines whether a woman's curiosity about you grows, or quietly fades. The second question a woman asks when she feels drawn to an older man is far more revealing than the first, and what makes it fascinating is how innocent it sounds. At some point during conversation, she might look at you and say something like, "So, what have you learned about relationships over the years?" Simple words, casual tone. But psychologically, this is one of the deepest tests of emotional maturity a man will ever face. Because when a woman asks this question, she isn't just curious about your past. She's trying to understand how your past shaped you. Every man who reaches maturity has a relationship history. There may have been love, heartbreak, misunderstandings, maybe even painful endings. Life rarely allows anyone to move forward without those experiences. But what women listen for in that moment is not the story itself. They listen for perspective. Some men respond to this question by immediately blaming their past partners. They describe betrayal, conflict, disappointment. And while those experiences may be real, the emotional tone behind the story tells her something important. It tells her whether the man in front of her has grown or simply hardened. Bitterness is something women can sense quickly. A man who carries resentment in his voice, even subtly, communicates that emotional wounds may still control him. And when a woman hears that, her mind quietly steps back. Not because she judges his past, but because she wonders if those unresolved emotions could appear again in a future relationship. But when a man answers this question with reflection rather than blame, the entire atmosphere changes. Imagine a man saying something like, "I've learned that relationships work best when both people keep growing, when communication stays honest, and when respect stays strong even during difficult moments." Notice the difference. The answer doesn't need to reveal every detail of the past. It simply reveals wisdom. And wisdom is deeply attractive. A mature woman isn't looking for a man who claims to have had perfect relationships. That would actually feel unrealistic. Instead, she looks for a man who understands the lessons life has taught him. Someone who has faced disappointment and come out of it with greater clarity instead of emotional damage. When a man speaks about relationships with calm understanding, he communicates something incredibly powerful: emotional stability. And emotional stability is one of the rarest qualities in modern dating. Many people today react quickly. They argue quickly. They leave quickly. But someone who has learned patience, perspective, and emotional balance through experience becomes very intriguing. Because experience without reflection creates arrogance. But experience combined with reflection creates wisdom. Women who feel curious about older men often sense this difference immediately. They are not just looking at age, they are looking at depth. Does this man understand people? Does he understand himself? The way you answer this question gives her that answer. And here is something most men never realize. She is also watching how comfortable you are discussing the topic. If a man becomes defensive, dismissive, or avoids the conversation entirely, it creates uncertainty. But when he speaks openly, calmly, and without emotional tension, it shows that he has made peace with his past. Peace is magnetic, because peace suggests a future without unnecessary drama. By the time a woman is mature enough to consider an older partner, she has usually experienced enough emotional turbulence in her life. What she values most now is something very different: clarity. A man who has clarity about himself, about relationships, and about the lessons life has given him becomes incredibly compelling. But here is where things become even more interesting. Because these two questions are not actually tests in the way many men imagine. They are invitations. Invitations to reveal something rare about yourself that younger men often cannot offer yet: perspective. And when that perspective appears naturally in your words, something unexpected begins to happen in the female mind. Curiosity turns into respect, and respect is where attraction quietly begins to grow. Here is something most men misunderstand about women who feel drawn to older men. It is not the age itself that attracts them. It is what age is supposed to represent: experience, stability, emotional depth. But here is the quiet truth. Age alone does not guarantee any of those things. A man can grow older and still carry the same insecurities, the same emotional reactions, the same confusion about relationships that he had decades earlier. And when that happens, women sense it almost immediately. That is why those two simple questions matter so much. They reveal whether a man has truly evolved through life or simply passed time. When a woman asks what keeps you busy or what you've learned about relationships, she is not interviewing you. She is reading your emotional landscape. She is asking herself something silently. Does this man feel peaceful to be around? Peace is incredibly important to mature women, not because they want a quiet life without excitement, but because they understand the cost of chaos. Many women have already experienced relationships filled with emotional storms, arguments that never ended, promises that never held, partners who were inconsistent or unpredictable. Over time, those experiences change what a woman values. She begins searching for emotional gravity, a man whose presence feels steady. And steadiness shows itself in subtle ways. It shows in how a man reacts to questions. Some men feel challenged when a woman asks about their life or their past. They respond defensively, as if they need to protect their pride. But a grounded man responds differently. He answers calmly. He doesn't rush. He doesn't exaggerate. He simply speaks with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who he is. And that calmness does something powerful to the emotional atmosphere between two people. It slows everything down. When a woman senses that a man is not trying to impress her, not trying to rush attraction, not trying to control the interaction, something interesting happens in her mind. Her curiosity grows. Because curiosity is the beginning of emotional attraction. When people feel pressured, they withdraw. But when they feel safe and intrigued, they lean in. Older men who understand this rarely chase attention. They simply hold their presence, and presence has a magnetic quality. Think about the difference between someone who constantly tries to prove their worth and someone who simply knows their worth. The first energy feels tense. The second feels calm. Women feel that difference immediately. That is why the way you respond to those two questions matters so much. Your answers are not just information. They are emotional signals. If your life has purpose, it shows. If you've learned from your experiences, it shows. If you carry bitterness or resentment, that shows too. Nothing reveals a man's inner world faster than the way he talks about his own life. But there is another layer to this dynamic that most men never notice. When a woman asks those questions and hears thoughtful answers, something begins happening inside her mind. She starts imagining. She imagines what it would feel like to spend time with someone who carries that calm perspective. She imagines conversations that feel thoughtful rather than chaotic. She imagines the possibility of a relationship that feels emotionally stable. And that imagination is powerful. Because attraction does not grow only from what is happening in the moment. It grows from the future someone begins picturing in their mind. A man who communicates wisdom and calm presence allows that picture to form naturally. He doesn't force it. He doesn't push it. He simply reveals himself honestly. And that honesty does something incredibly rare in modern dating. It creates trust before attraction even fully begins. But there is one final truth that ties everything together, a truth that explains why some older men effortlessly attract interest, while others struggle to be noticed at all. And it has nothing to do with appearance, money, or status. It has everything to do with how a man sees his own story. Here is the truth many men discover too late. Women don't become curious about an older man because he tries to prove his value. They become curious when a man clearly understands his value without needing to announce it. By the time a man reaches the later chapters of life, he carries something younger men simply cannot have yet: a story. Years of decisions, successes, failures, relationships, lessons, quiet victories no one else noticed. Moments that shaped who he became. But the real question is not whether a man has a story. Every man does. The real question is whether he has made peace with it. Because when a woman asks those two questions, what keeps you busy, and what you've learned about relationships, she is not only measuring your answers, she is measuring your relationship with your past. Some men speak about their life as if it is a list of regrets, opportunities missed, people who wronged them, time that slipped away too quickly. And while honesty is important, a man who lives inside regret communicates something heavy. It feels like unfinished emotional weight. But a man who speaks about his life with perspective creates a completely different feeling. He acknowledges challenges, but he focuses on growth. He recognizes mistakes, but he also recognizes what those mistakes taught him. That kind of self-awareness is incredibly rare. and rare qualities naturally attract attention. A mature woman senses when a man has reached that place of acceptance. His words are calmer. His tone carries quiet confidence. He doesn't sound like someone trying to rewrite the past. He sounds like someone who has learned from it. That emotional maturity creates something powerful in the space between two people. Respect. And respect is the beginning of real attraction. Many men think attraction begins with charm or appearance. But for women who value emotional depth, attraction often begins with admiration. Admiration for a man who understands life. Admiration for a man who doesn't pretend to be perfect. Admiration for a man who carries his years with dignity instead of apology. When a woman hears answers that reflect that kind of mindset, her curiosity naturally grows stronger. She begins seeing the man not just as someone interesting to talk to, but as someone who might bring stability into her world. Someone whose presence feels grounded rather than chaotic. And that feeling is powerful, because most people today are surrounded by noise, distractions, rushed conversations, relationships that begin quickly and disappear just as fast. But a man who moves through life with clarity and calm perspective stands out immediately. Not because he tries to, because authenticity is magnetic. The two questions we talked about are not traps designed to catch a man off guard. They are simple windows into his mindset. They reveal whether he lives with purpose. They reveal whether he has learned from life rather than fighting it. And, most importantly, they reveal whether he is emotionally ready to share his world with someone else. When a man answers those questions honestly and calmly, he shows something that cannot be faked: wisdom. And wisdom, more than anything else, is what many women quietly hope to find in an older man. So let me ask you something personal before you leave. If a woman asked you those two questions right now, what keeps you busy these days, and what life has taught you about relationships, what would your answers reveal about you? Would they show a man who is still searching, or a man who has truly learned from his journey? Write your answer in the comments. I'd really like to hear your perspective. And if this message helped you understand the deeper psychology behind attraction, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who might need to hear it. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can offer is not charm, status, or perfect words. It's the quiet wisdom that only life can teach.